So last week, I unveiled my top 10 teams going into the 2024 college football season. Those are the right 10 teams, especially going into a new era of college football where chaos will ensue. We're going to have matchups that don't make sense on paper. Geographically, it's going to be a nightmare for Plains. But I also listed about 12 to 14 teams that were honorable mentions. And lo and behold, you people all flooded my emails, flooded my conversations on Twitter and said, well, who do you have at number 11? Well, who comes in at number 14? Where was Kansas State ranked and all that? And I'm kind of tired of actually doing it on Twitter. So I figured, all right, we're just going to go ahead and do my top 25 teams actually from 25 to number 11. So real fast, if you're new to the channel, welcome on in. My name is Cole Thompson. I talk college football daily. So if this is the type of content you enjoy, make sure that you hit subscribe and also the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode of just saying it. Make sure you're following me on all the social media platforms, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Mr. Cole Thompson. Make sure that you also tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, college football fanatics everywhere about this channel because we're on the race to become the number one college football community. Would I love to be the number one YouTube show? Absolutely. But I'd rather be the number one college football community where we all coexist right here on YouTube. And also, if you have a question that you ever want read live on air or be a part of my Mailbag Monday, go ahead and email me, colethompsonwriting@gmail.com, or slide in the DMs on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson. So these are the top 25 teams, 25 through 11. I already did my top 10. I'm going to put a link right up there to where you can go ahead and click and see my actual top 10 teams, why I have them in order. But real fast, I'll go into a quick description. 1 Ohio State, 2 Georgia, 3 Oregon, 4 Texas, 5 Ole Miss. I feel like most people have those in some vicinity in an order that works. They feel like the 5 best teams. 6 Utah, 7 Alabama, 8 Missouri, 9 Michigan, 10 Penn State. You have an argument with Penn State. You have an argument with Michigan, Alabama, maybe before Utah. We can go into a dialect with that. That's not really the point. Let's do some honorable mentions real fast. These are the ones that just missed my cut for the top 25. Louisville. I like what they have in terms of what's coming via the transfer portal. They did a really good job replacing talent, but in the last few days, they have dwindled. They were in my initial top 25, and then they lost Tyler Barron, and then they lost Penny Boone. And then they lost yet another wide receiver. And then they lost an offensive lineman. And they've just continued to see players leave because they don't have the resources to be able to pay them an NIL. So couldn't put them on this list. Iowa State. Iowa State is really fun to me because of the Big 12 is the most chaotic, amazing conference in all of college football. It's going to be a bloodbath to the finish line in Arlington. They returned the most production in the sport this year. They are headlined by Rocco Becht. They got a really good coach in Matt Campbell that's highly respected around the league. I could see them going on a run. Texas A&M comes in next. If they had a second-year coach, let's just say Mike Elko was going into his second season, probably would be my top 25. On paper, really good team, but I'm tired of putting the wagon before the horse. So let them prove it this year before I go any further. Nebraska, kind of the same thing. You're very codependent on relying Dylan Raiola to be the answer and the solution. If he is, great. If not, you still got a top 40 defense headlined by a guy that I think should be a head coach this time next year in Tony White. And we all know that Matt Rule is going to continue with the rebuild in stage 2. Wisconsin, really interesting team to me. They bring over one of the running backs, Tyway Walker from Oklahoma. They might get a quarterback that better fits the system than Tanner Mordecai, which is weird because if he was an air raid dude in Tyler Van Dyke, I think he's a better fit for Phil Longo, who got to see him when he was at North Carolina. And then lastly, Kentucky. Kentucky, to me, this is a year where, once again, every 3 seasons, they're going to go like 10-2 or 9-3 and then go to a bowl game and get the win. That's what's going to happen this season. So they're on the outside looking in. 25, West Virginia. Spoiler alert to Big 12 fans. You're mentioned a lot through this next 5. Like, just plain and simple, you are. And West Virginia absolutely does. I am very excited to go see Neil Brown come to Big 12 Media Days with the double bird and the biggest shit-eating smile that he could possibly afford because of he's earned it. Last season, nobody thought that this team was going to be anything. Most people actually were already writing the obituary of Neil Brown because if he wasn't able to get over the mark, kind of like Eli Drinkowitz was, and then he also got a contract extension, but they went 9-4. They got some big time wins. They were staying in competitive nature when it came down to the race for Arlington. They didn't get there, but they do return their starting quarterback in Garrett Green. They have a great running back tandem headlined by CJ Donaldson. I like that they carry on this walk-on mantra, underdog field. Their leading receiver last year walked onto the program and finished with over 800 plus yards. They return over 67% of their defensive production. Their schedule is daunting, especially when you look at the end of the season. But again, it's the Big 12. You're going to have matchups where one weekend you look phenomenal and the next you absolutely crap the bed, which means there is an opportunity for West Virginia to stay in the hunt. They have one of the most underappreciated linemen in all of college football, Wyatt Philman. So if you get him and you get Garrett Green, who in my opinion absolutely belongs right along every other quarterback in the Big 12 in terms of star power talent, Morgantown's going to be a really interesting place. It's going to be very hard to play as well. Speaking of which, a team that actually replaced Louisville in my rankings because of what they did, UCF. They landed Penny Boone. They landed Jacoby Jones. They landed KJ Jefferson. They landed a lot of talent. The Gus bus is rolling throughout the second portal of the spring. And this feels like now a Knights roster that probably is not going to go to the college football playoff. But I will say this much. They're going to play the spoiler role. Like, you can go ahead and bet your bottom dollar right now because of who we know Gus Malzahn is, what we know about his past. He's going to win a game that he shouldn't in the month of November. Or it's going to happen against like an SEC school. Or he's going to beat up on one of the teams that is the heavy favorite going into this year. They return over 70% of their production. I like the additions they brought in. KJ Jefferson is not Cam Newton. I have this rule in life. Never compare legends to anybody in college football. So to me, Reggie Bush is off the table. Johnny Manziel is off the table. Cam Newton's off the table. Vince Young's off the table. They're their own kind of player. You let them just be. But if there ever was a quarterback that does emulate a lot of the same skill set as Cam Newton, it's got to be KJ Jefferson. And who caught fire at Auburn? Oh, yeah, it was Gus Malzahn with that quarterback. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup. Their schedule is very back heavy. And there's a lot of marquee matchups throughout the year. But again, this feels like a team that maybe doesn't go to the playoff, but they are a team that is going to create chaos in helping a team get to the playoff. 23, Kansas. Literally, these three, you can kind of go ahead and just mix and match them however you want. But with Kansas, they have the best coach of the trio. In my opinion, Lance Leipold is either a top 10 coach or he is at number 11 and the first honorable mention off the list. He's a program builder. Like the way we talk about Matt Rule, we need to talk about more so with Lance Leipold because the results end up panning out in terms of conference titles, not just making it that far, not just getting double-digit wins like he did. No, they won at Wisconsin Whitewater. He immediately won at Buffalo. He turned that program around. Kansas was the laughingstock of college football. Like, can we just all agree that Kansas at one point actually had a petition out there to get rid of the football program because they were just done being the worst team in FBS history? Well, they have a quarterback in Jalen Daniels. They have a great run game headlined by Devin Neal. They return all three of their starting wide receivers, which is very underrated. The only question I have is, what does this offense now look like with Jeff Grimes calling the shots versus Andy Kotelnicki? Because Andy Kotelnicki was a really good explosive type of design guy. He was always somebody that you thought was going to make the highlight play. Do you feel that way with Grimes now that they made a changeover in Baylor? If so, then I do think Kansas is going to stay in the running. If not, well, maybe they're about an 8-4 team, kind of like West Virginia, kind of like UCF, not going to the playoff, but making sure someone else doesn't make it. 22, Virginia Tech. I'm higher on them than most. There are some people who are a lot higher on Virginia Tech than I am, but can we just appreciate what Brent Pry did at the end of last season? They found a way to be able to get a couple of wins. They got to bowl eligibility, which was a big time deal for this team. They get a win over Tulane. They have momentum, and people are buying into Blacksburg. They're buying into what Lane Stadium is about. And for the younger audience out there, let me just go ahead and leave you a quick little story. There was a guy by the name of Frank Beamer. You probably know his son, Shane. He's coaching right now in Columbia, South Carolina. And he dominated college football. Like, literally put the fear of God in teams that we talk about as national contenders every year. And he did that at Virginia Tech. And every single year, you talked about the Hokies as a legit contender. You talked about the Hokies as a team that could hold their own against anybody. And they may not have gone to the national championship every year, but you're damn sure that they were either keeping somebody out or they were fighting down to the finish line. Well, they returned the third most production among a Power 4 schools, 86%. They bring back their starting quarterback in Kyron Jones. They bring back their starting running back in Bashal Talton. They bring back Daquan Phaeton, who was their number one wide receiver last year, averaged 17.8 yards per play. They also bring back their starting tight end in Daquan Wright. They bring back two other players. They bring back their leading tackler. It's the same team that's carrying over another year in this system. And their schedule, it's really, really relaxed. They have 2 games at the beginning of the year. Rutgers at Miami. And then you get a little bit of a break, and then you go to the middle of the year, Syracuse, home against Clemson. And I don't think that you're going to be undefeated going into that Clemson game. I think that you're probably going to have 1 loss, maybe 2 at most. But can you imagine what Lane Stadium would be like with an undefeated Virginia Tech team, with the sights of Charlotte on their minds, with this much returning production, and they get to enter Sandman with the da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. There's a reason why when we talk about traditions in college football, this might be the best one. It's because the camera never takes its eye off of the Hokies. They want to see them take the field. And Brent Pry's been waiting for this opportunity to finally be the great coach that we know he was. And he has the roster to do so. This is probably that one team that I always talk about with NC State. They always find a way to be right on the edge of making it to Charlotte, but they never do. That I feel like is Virginia Tech going into this year. Number 21, Oklahoma State. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Oklahoma State. They have Mike Gundy. At the end of the day, if you have a great coach, one of the best in your conference, and yes, while I do think that Kyle Whittingham has a slight edge over Mike Gundy, it's literally a coin flip. There's going to be people that say Stillwater has the right guy in the head honcho. There'll be people that say Salt Lake City does. But they return the number 1 running back in the country in Ollie Gordon. He's probably a top 10 player in college football. They return the second most production among Power 4 schools. Only Iowa State has more. I don't know if that's a good thing. I really don't. But what I can tell you is that this is an offense that is not going to be missing a beat. This is a defense that's returning most of its starters. Their schedule, again, it's a lot like I would say Virginia Tech. You got 2 games early on in the season, one against potentially the team you'll meet up in Arlington with Utah. And then you got another game that I'm circling on the calendar. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's Arizona. If it's not Arizona, my bad. But I do think when you talk about Oklahoma State, they're a proven commodity. The thing that I will also say real fast, Boone Pickens Stadium. You talk to people around college football. You talk to people in the NFL, because I get to do coverage for the Texans as well. They'll tell you, toughest place in college football to play is Boone Pickens Stadium, because it's small, but it's very condensed. You got a great aura brought in by the fans. They're clad out in the orange and the black. And then you hear the sticks as they rattle off against the concrete. Boom, 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 boom. And it's like you can't hear the play calling. And so you got to call a timeout. And the atmosphere of what Stillwater is, this is not a second-class program. Like, yeah, Oklahoma reigns supreme because they're the state school, but this is state. And by the way, the Pokes are going to be poking their way into a conversation to make the college football playoff. 20 is Clemson. Here's the reason why. I don't trust them without having the names in the transfer portal. They did nothing. They were one of 2 schools to go ahead and not bring in a single player via the transfer portal. That's a problem. You know who the other 3 were? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back to it. Oh, yeah. The military academies. That's it. But you also got to go ahead and give credit where credit's due. Dabo does things his own way. He beats to his own drum. They've always been a complete roster in terms of what we expect from them. Their schedule is manageable. You're getting another year with Garrett Riley, who once was considered the next big name in college football coaching, to work with Kay Klubnik, another quarterback that many people thought was right alongside the Quinn Ewers of the world, the Jaden Rashadas of the world. He was right there. Some people had him as QB1 in that recruiting class. So it's another season of proven commodities. They did go out and they brought in 2 4-star talents at wide receiver, TJ Moore and Bryant Westco. I think that both of them could end up being difference makers. The thing is that also I was really worried about what the defense was going to look like with Brent Venables gone. Hasn't missed a beat. Like, it hasn't. They still have Peter Woods. He's one of the best defensive linemen in the ACC, if not all of college football. They still have one of the best linebackers. Yeah, they lost some names in the secondary, but Clemson still has the second best odds or the third best odds, according to FanDuel, to go win the ACC. You can't count them out. Like, you can't count out Dabo until he actually gives you a reason. Maybe they're no longer national title contenders. It doesn't mean they're not playoff ones. 19, Arizona. This is the team that I am higher on than most. I don't care. I don't. You bring in Brent Brennan, you lose Jed Fish overnight. He flies up to Seattle, says, see you later, Tucson. But you don't lose Noah Fafita. And to me, when you have a top 10 quarterback going into a new conference and he is your leader and he is somebody that was able to convince other players, including T-Mac, Tetaturoa McMillan, be able to bring in most of your defense. Tacario Davis is back as well. You still feel good about what you have on the defensive line, even though you lost guys like Bill Norton in the offseason. That's good enough for me. Brent Brennan is a guy that was able to do more with less, and he cares about a program. Like, there are going to be people out there that will tell you with a straight face, this is my dream job. Like, do you remember in The Blind Side when you heard Ed Orgeron say, oh, thank you, man, this is my dream job? It's like, no, it wasn't. Your dream job was LSU. You got it eventually. Congratulations. But I do think Brent Brennan's dream job might be Arizona. And so if you watch what he did when he was at San Jose State, and you also look at the way that he cared about his players and put his players first in every avenue, that's what's coming to Tucson. That's what's coming to the Wildcats. And you're entering an era where you have a good recruiting baseline. You have a guy that is going to sell you and truly, I think, be convinced that this is home for him. And you have the quarterback and wide receiver. The second best wide receiver in college football is T-Mac. He may even be the first. Like, you can do a 1A, 1B with Luther Burden and call it a day. Nobody's going to argue with you on this. They're going to have a good defense. And the game against Kansas State is a non-conference matchup, so that doesn't hurt their schedule. I'm not going to be shocked if Arizona goes on a run and finds their way. By the way, also, they play Utah and Arizona State. Kansas State back-to-back weeks. And they have a bye in between. What if they just win both? Like, what is your persona of Arizona moving forward? Because to me, it's a damn good team that is on the come up. And more importantly, it's a team that at this point can afford to lose a game. And if they lose one, they're not out of the running to go to the college football playoff. Like, Arizona right now is number 19. They may end up being the 4th seed in the college football playoff. 18, NC State. Another team I'm really high on. Look, I'm going to be completely real. I'm about to do a series that drops tomorrow talking about why I want you to convince me on a team to root for. Because every single year, I'll pick one team from each conference to pull for. Last season, Washington was my go-to team. I really liked Arizona. I feel like the front runners going into the Big 12. The ACC has always been NC State. Like, I'm an actual closeted NC State fan. And now they bring in one of my favorite quarterbacks I've ever seen play in the last 5 years, Grayson McCall. I think he's a good fit for Robert and I's offense. They also have a great defense. They've always had a great defense underneath Dave Duran. They also bring in Justin Rogers to pair alongside Casey Compassion, who last year was a breakout wide receiver. And you also bring in Justin Jolly. And I don't know how much you watched of UConn football, because you sickos out there definitely, I know, enjoy it. But Justin Jolly is a 6'5" version of Kyle Pitts with great route running, surefire hands, and can be a flex option in the tight end spot. Yeah, good luck defending that. Their schedule bodes well. They don't have any marquee matchup late this season. That week 2 game against Tennessee, I think, is going to carry a lot of weight when it comes to making the college football playoff. But if I were to tell you that the Wolfpack, with this roster, with the way that they just need to get through October and then coast into November, would make it to Charlotte, would you call me far-fetched? I don't think so. I think many of you would actually agree with me, because you know their defense is going to be great. You know their offense is going to have a quarterback upgrade from Brennan Armstrong and probably MJ Morris. You know that also they're going to have the right coach. This is always a team that is tier 2 in the ACC. I kind of want to see them get to tier 1. I think that they're right on the cusp of being that fringe tier 1, probably always going to be a tier 2, but maybe just for 2024, they are a tier 1 roster. 17, Oklahoma. If you watch my stuff on SEC Unfiltered, I'm basically the Oklahoma homer. I'm not really. I don't think that they are an elite team by any means. I just think that the way that we're talking about them compared to Texas is absolutely asinine. Like, you do realize they have a great defense. And that's going to be a thing that carries a lot of weight for them. Danny Stunsman's back. Billy Bowman's back. They still have Peyton Bowen on the roster. They brought over Dominic Williams, who was a monster for TCU the last 2 years. He's going to be a plug-and-play addition up the middle. They still have really good pass rushers, even if Deshaun McCullough doesn't pan out the way that we once thought he was. And there was a reason why Dylan Gabriel left. It wasn't because of NIL, and it wasn't because of Oregon's going to be a better spot for him, because in the Pac-12, yeah, maybe, but it's the Big Ten. You're still going up against high-profile defenses in colder weather. It's because Jackson Arnold is that good. Like, a lot of people are going to go ahead and point to the bowl game, and here's the one rule I have. We're not going to fall for bowl syndrome. It just is asinine to even go near that conversation. you know that you've already seen what a guy like Deion Burks can do. If you haven't bought your stock in Deion Burks, I'm telling you, please right now go ahead and put in your number and make sure that you have bought as much as humanly possible because he is going to explode next season in the SEC. But they also have Angelo Anthony. They also have Nick Anderson. They still have Gavin Sawchuk back there. And they still have Brent Venables, who is a defensive mastermind. Yeah, their schedule's tough. It's the SEC. Almost every schedule is tough. Like, yeah, Florida has it a little bit worse. And then probably you would say Oklahoma's right behind them. But it still doesn't mean they're bad teams. They're really good rosters that are able to combat what they are. And so let's just say there comes a point where they actually do hit their stride right after the Red River and they just go on an epic proportion and they get a win over South Carolina and they beat Ole Miss and they go 8-4. Is that not good enough for Oklahoma in year one? I do think that 8-4 with this SEC schedule, that puts them as about a 17th ranked team. 16, Kansas State. Please, for the love of God, please, Chris Klieman, I'm begging you, run the wishbone because you can. Because you can. Like that's the whole point. Because you can. Do you know how awesome it would be to have this offense just completely different than anybody else in the Big 12, the greatest conference in all of college football? Because if you watch the way they play, they have the talent. Dylan Edwards is a great running back. I know he has some fumbling issues and he's really good as a pass catcher, but he still is a good running back and he's back in the Sunflower State. You have Avery Johnson. We know that he is an exceptional quarterback and he's going to have a lot of growing room for the next 2 years. You also have DJ Giddings. Do you know that people kind of forgot about who DJ Giddings was? Like, it's baffling because you have RJ Harvey at UCF and you have Oklahoma State with Ollie Gordon, and then you bring in Utah and whatever they bring in. And it's like, hi, I was over 1,200 rushing yards last year. I had over 1,400 total yards of offense. Yeah, I'm that good. They also have a great defense. They have the coach. Like as long as Chris Klieman is calling the shots in Manhattan, there is a conversation to where, yes, the Big 12 does run through the Little Apple. It does. And again, that game against Arizona in week 2, it's not a conference matchup, so it doesn't hinder your shot of going to Arlington, and it doesn't hurt your chances of going to the college football playoff. I really like Kansas State as a sleeper in terms of making it past the first round. I do think that they are a favorite in the Big 12. 15, Tennessee. Great offense. We know their offense is going to be good. Here's the part where I'm really interested to learn about this offense. What does a Josh Heupel unit look like with the play calling? Now with a quarterback that he loves. Because I'm not trying to be rude to anybody out there when it comes to comments about Hendon Hooker, when it comes to comments about Joe Milton. But those were guys that were committed to the former staff. Jeremy Pruitt brought them in from Virginia Tech and Michigan. And they stuck around, and Heupel said, okay, I'm going to give you guys a shot. And they had a really good run with Hendon Hooker. They had somewhat good results with Joe Milton. You can argue a bunch of yourselves with that. But now you bring in Nico Iamaleava. And so now with Nico, you feel like that this is going to be an offense that takes that next jump. They also have some really good wide receivers. I love the addition of what they brought in. With Chris Brazzell. I love Holden Stales, the tight end that came on over from Notre Dame. I also really like the addition of Mikey Matthews. If you haven't heard of him, he was a 4-star talent. If you hear Deontay Thornton talk about him, they say he's going to be unstoppable. What if he is? Like, what if Brew McCoy doesn't live up to expectations this year? Squirrel White kind of regresses, but then you have what Rymel Keaton was supposed to be last year, and it is just a vertical presence with these two moving forward. Like, Tennessee can still be a legit threat in the SEC. They got to play Alabama. That's going to be difficult. They got to play Georgia. That's going to be difficult. But 9-3 is not off the radar of making the college football playoff. 10-2 could still be a possibility for this team. My only question I have is the secondary. I have no concerns whatsoever about the offense. Defensively, I have no concerns with the front seven. I have a lot of concerns when it comes to that secondary. And especially in a year where you feel like this is the moment you can plant the flag and say, we are back, we are relevant, and we're not going anywhere anytime soon. Speaking of relevancy, Miami at 14. I am high on Miami, but much like Texas last year, if you looked at my rankings, I had Texas as the 13th ranked team going into 2024. Why? I need to see them prove it. It's great on paper. You have all the talent in the world. You have a great defensive line. You have an exceptional offensive line, headlined by Francis Malanuga. You also have a great quarterback coming on in Cam Ward. Anybody that does not believe that Cam Ward was worth the NIL funds, you're out of your mind. The kid is phenomenal. The kid is an upgrade for this offense for Shannon Dawson. They also bring in a north to south runner in Damian Martinez. I don't have questions with the wide receiver room with Sam Brown coming on in. I don't have questions with the defense. Like, I know that Tyler Barron is somewhat of a hit and miss player. He comes on over from Louisville. He was there for a hop, skip, and a jump. He was at Ole Miss for like all of 2 seconds. Now he comes to Coral Gables. He feels like a kid that is not going to need a lot of refinement to his game. You want to be a rotational player. If he gets to come on in and be that dude, I really do love what he brings as a pass rusher. But again, where's the flaw? You have a great secondary. You brought in Simeon Barrow to be your defensive tackle. Your schedule is extremely manageable after Florida State, and you have the talent on both sides of the football. It's a year. It is. This is, again, a moment where you hear all the notes, all the accolades, all the pandering from people saying Miami can't do it. Miami is just Miami of old. They're never going to get back to the same spot. And you're right. They might not. But what if they do? What if Mario, again, didn't really care about year one, thought that last season was more so important to build a recruiting baseline and start working the NIL funds to say, this is what's actually favoring us. And now that he has all the pieces, it all just comes together. Because the guy doesn't leave a place like Oregon just to go ahead and take over a program that he doesn't believe can actually pan out. So I look at this Miami team, and until they prove it, I can't put them any higher. But I am really high on Miami going into this year. If you've watched any of my other videos, I talk about them as the next breakout team. It'll be very hard pressed for me not to say that they aren't a college football playoff contender. But number 13 is Florida State. Why? Proof of concept. That is what separates these two for me. It's the proof of concept. You look at what they can be. You look at what they should be. You look at what they lost, but what they gained. Mike Norvell can go on another run. He absolutely can. They got some tough games. That game against Georgia Tech in Dublin on week 0 is going to be cinema. I love the Ireland game. In fact, I may try to even go to that game just because of how much I love my people. I have a shamrock tattoo. That's not really part of the point. The point is that there is now a culture and an identity set in Tallahassee. Something that wasn't there by the very end of the Jimbo Fisher era. Something that wasn't there at all underneath Willie Taggart. It was why he was ran out of town within 2 years. And it took some time, but now you feel like this is a program that is only going to take that next step. You love the addition on the defensive front. You love the addition at wide receiver. You love the things that you bring in terms of the offensive line. Marvin Jones Jr. should be the next version of Jared Verse. And he already comes from playing against tough talent. He already played against Florida State in the Orange Bowl. They have a schedule that's manageable. I want to say that they are the favorites in the ACC because they should. They earned it. They last year went on an epic run. You got to prove that this is consistent. But I think that when we talk about Texas being BACK, it's very close. I maybe would actually say if they were in the Big 12. But in the ACC, Florida State is back. Florida State, I think, has sustainability. They have an identity, and they have a proven concept that if you come to Tallahassee, you play at Doak Campbell, you learn underneath us, you go and be adapted, you'll be better equipped to make it to the NFL. Drake Benson learned that. Malik Neighbors, Johnny Wilson learned that. Keon Coleman learned that. Braden Fisk learned that. Like, literally everybody was a transfer last year, and they all got drafted. So there's a proof of concept. 12 is LSU. The reason why I have LSU at 12 is because the defense. I want to put them in my top 10. I know that a lot of people are going to say, but their offense lost Mike Denbrock, and they lost Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner, and they lost a bunch of wide receivers. You want to know why I say that? Because it's LSU. They always bring in the right talent. They always feel good at quarterback. They always feel good at wide receiver. They have the best offensive line in the country. Emory Jones and Will Campbell are the best 1-2 combination. One is the best player in college football for my money. That's Will Campbell. One is a top 30 player in Emory Jones. They also have, I think, a great quarterback that has gotten years to learn this system. So it should be second nature, even though Joe Sloan is now calling the plays instead of Mike Denbrock with Garrett Nussmeier. You've already seen what he looks like in sporadic form. Now imagine you get that 12 games in a row. That's 10 wins. That's 11 wins. That's a playoff spot. And then you bring in CJ Daniels at wide receiver. He was the flaming target for Liberty last year. He is going to be Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, whatever you want to call him, down in Baton Rouge. Xavier Thomas is going to be Quicksilver, but the one that actually made it out of the X-Men movies, not the one in the Avengers. Not the point. He is so damn fast. You can't catch him. Like, we don't talk enough about Xavier Thomas because of what they have with Kyron Lacey and what they have with CJ Daniels. You still have a good defensive backfield. You still feel good about your linebacker room. Your defensive line is the only thing that you worry about. But then there's also this part that I want to bring up that's really important. Sometimes getting the students is a big deal, but having the teacher that's going to be there for the long haul might be more important. You know who the teacher is, right? Oh yeah, Bo Davis, who literally just led Texas's defensive front to a college football playoff berth and a Big 12 title. The schedule's challenging. Not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. That game week 1 against the high-tempo offense that is USC is going to be, I think, cinema out in Las Vegas. Go ahead and bet on black that LSU and USC go ahead and beat the spread. But if they can show that their defensive front underneath Blake Baker, which again, you're seeing adaptability from Brian Kelly, the second best coach in college football. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you people. He's the second best coach. He's the most proven coach right now. He's making the changes. I agree with him on NIL. I agree with him with what he said. All of that, you go ahead and you tell yourself, yes, with this guy leading the charge, we're still going to be a playoff team. Would you doubt it? Because I'm not. I'm absolutely not doubting it whatsoever. At number 11, Notre Dame. The reason I have Notre Dame on this list is they're going to have a schedule that will allow them to prove to everybody, yes, we do belong in the college football playoff. They're a ground and pound offense that does have the offensive line in terms of adaptability. They did lose Blake Fisher. They did lose Joe Alt. They did lose one other player in the trenches, but it just feels like a wash, rinse, repeat at this point. They have some physical running backs in the backfield, but it's the defense. Benjamin Morrison coming back in, that's a huge win. Xavier Watts coming back at safety, that's another win. And then you can bring in Mike Denbrock. So you have the ground and pound offense with now the up-tempo that you're going to have working with Riley Leonard. It just feels like this is the year that Notre Dame is going to clinch. This just feels like the year where it all comes together for the Fighting Irish. And at the end of it all, you feel like, yep, they're going to be a playoff team. They're never going to get a bye. They're never going to get anything when it comes to getting the number 1 seed. I don't think it's going to be possible, but they could be the 5 seed and they could absolutely beat up on everybody. Their defense is really sound. They're doing a great job recruiting, something that it felt like a problem underneath Brian Kelly. Now kind of feels like a problem to figure out what talent you don't want to bring in underneath Marcus Freeman. And let's just say Marcus Freeman goes in. By the way, the best looking coach in college football. I'm not even going to argue with you on this one. If he does go to the playoff this year, it's just, again, proof that Jack Swarbrick knew what he was doing. You could have brought in Luke Fickell. You could have brought in a more high-profile name. But instead, you brought in the dude that was able to start recruiting, start giving you a baseline and an avenue for success. And he proved to you very quickly, I can turn my recruiting assets and my defensive prowess into a full-fledged program. People are buying in, and I am selling you the fact that we are here and we're going to be a playoff team for years on end. But those are my top 25 teams that were not mentioned in my top 10 video. Again, top 10 video at the very beginning of this. You can go ahead and check it out in all my other videos here on YouTube. Just do me a favor and hit subscribe. Make sure that you're also following me on all the social media platforms, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Mr. Cole Thompson. To keep up with everything I'm also doing, email me, colethompsonwriting@gmail.com. And just one more thing, tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, college football aficionados, everywhere about this channel, because I'm on the race to become not just the number 1 YouTube show talking college football. I get it. It's pipeline dream. It is. We can all agree with that one. But I am on the role to be the number 1 college football community. In the great words of Tom Petty, take it easy. I'm Cole Thompson. Until next time, folks. Later.